My name is Dianne. They say talk about what you know, and not to brag or anything, but I menstruate once a month, so we're going to talk about periods. And we're all going to talk about periods tonight, so it's something that happens to women, but it affects you men as well, as you all know. So yeah, why do we call periods periods? And could we call it a better word, and would it smell any better if we did? Probably not, because that's just air oxidizing with the blood and that's what causes the smell. But the word period is a perfect word for what is happening, because you have two periods of time. There's the period of which you bleed for, which can be 2 to 7 days, is completely normal, and then the cycle of the frequency of your period cycle. So period is the perfect word because it means both those things. Then you also have menstruation, which comes from the Latin menstruus, which means month. Got it, nailed it, out of the park. Then you have tampon, which is my favorite. It comes from the medieval French word tampon, I think, and it means to plug a hole with a cloth or a rag. So immediately you're thinking tampon. And then you have, what's the last one? Oh, you have on the rag. So on the rag is a phrase that we know to be when you're menstruating, but it actually became popular during the 19th century because that's exactly what women had to do during the 19th century, was use their rags while they were menstruating. So they would get a rag and they would tampon it. To use the correct terms. If you want to know more about actual menstruation, you can watch a Disney film, no joke. This is the story of menstruation. It's a 10-minute film made by Walt Disney, animated, beautiful, for school children. So you can look it up on YouTube. It's actually great. This is a small gift for it, just so we all know. Menstruation, the bleeding is actually the... You didn't know? Menstruation is just when the lining of the womb leaves the body because there hasn't been the fertilization of the egg that's been released. So we all know as well, we're not the only things in the world that menstruate in this way. There's a couple others, but they're very, very few. There's some other primates, not all primates, and then there's the fruit bat, which we only discovered in 2007 was having a period. So misunderstood. And then, and also the elephant shrew, which is a tiny thing that doesn't look like an elephant, and I was very disappointed. And then other mammals do have a menstruation, but they don't actually bleed. What they do is they reabsorb their endometrium. So it's called a covert menstruation. And we're all incredibly jealous of them. The signs and symptoms of menstruation aren't actually associated with the bleeding. The bleeding doesn't cause any pain itself. It's the PMS, which stands for premenstrual syndrome. And 10 to 20% of women have PMS that's so extreme it affects their lifestyle. So you can have women who have vomiting and migraines, crying spells, and these are all medical signs and symptoms of PMS. We're not fucking around, guys. Like, it's serious. We don't know why we're crying either. There's some myths that we can dispel. There's a lot that we actually can't because there hasn't been a lot of research about periods, which is a real shame. One that we can't debunk, but we can use our common sense, is whether or not periods affects your performance during sports. And in 2016 at the World Olympics, Fu, the swimmer, said, yeah, I didn't perform so well because I was on my period. And this was a huge thing, but it happens every single year, but we never have research to actually back up these individual female claims. And also we know that between the ages of 10 and 12 are when girls are most likely to drop out of sports, and that's also the age where they're getting their period. But this is correlation and not causation because we haven't done the research. One myth that we can fully debunk, and we're going to do it tonight, is the idea that women synchronize when they're in close quarters to each other. And you might have experienced the phenomenon, but it's actually just maths. So Martha McClintock, who was a Harvard student, published this paper in 1971 in Nature, so really, really prestigious journal. And what she did was she had girls in dormitories, and from October to April, she tracked their menstrual cycle. And she also asked them, who are you hanging around with? So if they were hanging around with certain people, they should become closer in their menstruation. And in October, they were about 6 to 5 days apart, so pretty good difference. And then by the end of the study in April, they were only 2 days apart. So magic happened, and they synced up. But that's not necessarily the case, because each period is different. You can have a 21-day cycle, or you could have a 45-day cycle, and both those extremes are normal. So to display this, if you had someone who starts menstruating on the 1st of January, but they have a 35-day cycle, And then you have another woman who starts menstruating on the 15th of January. I know it's dates, it's confusing. But she has a 21-day cycle. Their next period will happen on the 4th and the 5th of February. So they start with 2 weeks apart, and then they're 1 day apart. And it's not magic, it's just maths. So we can completely debunk it. She also thought if you were a woman and you had a lot of men friends, that your periods would be shorter. It's not true. The first ever ancient sanitary products were all tampons. Depending on what ancient culture you were in, that was the method that you used. So in ancient Egypt, you would use papyrus. In Rome, you would use wool. And then in Greece, you'd use lint for some reason. And it never actually changed to sanitary pads until the dawn of religion, really, when it became shameful for women to touch parts of their bodies. Ancient times, it's all about the tampons. And then we can go straight up until the late 18th century with the first ever marketed sanitary product, which was a complete failure because women weren't ready to say, I need this and I'm gonna buy this and look you in the eyes as I purchase it. And that was Johnson & Johnson's Lister towels. So they didn't take off at all and they were a failure. The first successful sanitary product that was sold was actually bandages. And it was during World War I, and French nurses realized that these are way more absorbent. Let's tampon them. And that was the brand Cortex. And then we can jump a couple of years ahead to 1929, and Dr. Earl Haas invents the first modern day tampon. And the first modern day tampon also was invented with an applicator. He didn't get any kind of interest in it because Johnson's Lister pads failed, but a German immigrant woman actually buys it from him and starts manufacturing it from her home. And then in 1936, they're already on the shelves in America, and women are actually buying them and using them, which is a really interesting story. And this is Tampax, which we know today. Then the menstrual cup, actually, just a guess, when was the menstrual cup invented? Never mind. 1936, you're right. And it was only 3 years after the sale of tampons, but not successful at all. It wasn't successful in the 40s, 50s, or the 70s, and for some reason is becoming popular now, and mine has something to say with our society's values. And then the last version of tampons that we know was invented in the 1940s by a German gynecologist. So we really owe tampons to German women, actually, which I kind of always knew in a way. And she invented them without the applicator. And she also is the person that we have to thank or blame for this kind of active lifestyle being thrown in our faces every time we're menstruating. Because she was an active swimmer, so she couldn't use pads, but she didn't believe in the waste of the applicators for the tampons either. So they were the O.B. Johnson's tampons. And then in the 21st century, we have kind of fads coming in, like the menstrual cups and Thinks period pants as well, which are these beautifully advertised period pants in the subways of New York City. And I actually ordered some, and they're fucking brilliant. So tampons are great, pads are pretty okay, and we nailed it, right? But not really. There's still a lot of room for improvement. The first one being the fact that we don't get to know what's being used in our tampons. And the reason for this, and actually I'll throw some out at you, and if you need any of the products, just take them. Can I just, yeah? Great. So originally when tampons and sanitary products became made, they were known as cosmetics. And then in 1976, to protect the consumers, they got re-legislated into medical devices, which means that they have to get tested more. But it also meant that they dodged the cosmetics ruling that they have to list all the ingredients on mascaras or nail polishes or lipsticks. So that's why if you go to MAC, you get to know exactly what you're putting on your face, whether or not you understand all those chemicals, but why all these 3 brands don't have any ingredients on them, and why they don't have to, still in this day. And then the other thing as well that's getting a big backlash at the moment is the fact that there's tax on all these items, and there's no standardization of these tax either, so this varies in state to state and country by country, and this is a tax that women are only going to be made to pay as well. So the highest tax is in Hungary at 27%, and then the Scandinavian countries as well are in the mid-20s to low 20s, so not as progressive as you think. So to really illustrate my point, we're going to play a game, if that's okay. Do you want to play a game? Yes. Super. So we're going to play higher or lower. I'm going to say a number with a fact to it, and you're just going to let me know if you think that should be higher or lower, okay? I wish I was. Okay. 300, the number of periods experienced in a lifetime. Higher or lower? All the women like, higher, higher. Yeah, it's 450, and you should also know you are having more periods today than any woman any other time in the world. Because, yay! 50, the number of tampons NASA engineers suggest Sally Field take to space with her for a week-long trip. Higher or lower? Lower. Lower. They're smart, right? They're smart. 100. Like, what? 15,000, the average number of tampons or pads used in a lifetime. Higher? Higher? It all sounds like women. Like the men are like, don't play this game. It's lower, 11,400. Very exact, but anywhere between 9,000 and 16,000, you're grand. 2 billion, the number of people in the world without proper sanitation. Higher. Yeah, you're very clever people. 2.4 billion, which is 1 out of 3 people. And when you don't have proper sanitation, you're not going to be able to properly manage your menstruation. So you see where this is going, right? 18%, the number of girls in India who drop out of school because of their period. Higher or lower? Higher. Yeah, it's 23%. Sorry. 3 million, the cost for providing free sanitary products in every school, shelter, and prison in New York. Lower. Higher? Oh. Lower? Yeah, so it's only 1.9 million, and this is actually enacted in 2016 that they're going to be providing every school, prison, and shelter with free sanitary products, and that's the equivalent of providing them with soap. So it's not that much. And then 12.5, tax in Ireland on tampons. Oh, everyone? Higher? 0%. Hooray! And then 15%, the drop in absenteeisms for Ugandan girls after receiving girl kits, which were reusable menstrual packs. So the absentee rate dropped 15%, higher or lower? Higher. Higher, 20%, instantly after receiving the packs. So hopefully there you can see that there's a lot of things wrong in the world that we live in, and we know that, but there is a progression that we're going in, but it's not happening quick enough. And every single girl in the world is going to go through menstruation, and rather have that be a barrier for her socializing or playing sports or pursuing her education, we need to demand that there's more innovation, that there's more justice, and that there's more awareness about what a period is for both boys and girls, so that it doesn't affect any girls in their lives, period.
Beautiful Dianne McSweeney.